My name is Dave, and welcome to the Technician License course. This is Chapter 1, Introduction. This is based on the American Radio Relay League License Manual with the 2018 to 2022 question pool. Note, however, that this particular chapter has no questions associated with it on the exam. So if you are in the finishing stages of studying for the examination, you might want to skip this chapter and study the remaining chapters. This is really intended as an overview of ham radio. This class is the product of years of development. The basic structure of the class was developed primarily by Tammy WA7TZ and Ken AB7X with various lecturers over the years. It is an honor to have inherited the class. I'm Dave AA7XX with help from others in the club. This particular series was substantially revised when the new question pool came out, but it still carries the bones of the original structure. I have a PhD in electrical engineering, although that's not what I do for my day job. During the day, I'm a physician. I do radiology during the day, but at night I put on my red cape and become super nerd ham radio operator, and it's a lot of fun. The class is based on the American Radio Relay League ham radio license manuals. There are 3 levels. There's the technician class, which is level 1, general class, which is level 2, and finally the amateur extra class, which is level 3. This introduction can apply equally well to all of these levels, although is really geared towards the technician class. So before we get going on ham radio, it's interesting to look at the world before radio. So in recent times, before the existence of radio, we relied on the telegraph. The first transatlantic telegraph cable was laid in 1857, and kind of worked sporadically and failed in short order, but in subsequent years more reliable communications were established. Before the telegraph and radio, however, we had to rely on visual signals and on mail. Visual signals with mirrors, torches, and smoke have been used over the years. One can think of the Paul Revere famous message with the lanterns, one if by land, two if by sea, for example. Smoke signals have been used over the years. They were used by the ancient Chinese. Messages could be sent 490 miles in a few hours. The Native Americans also used smoke signals. In some cultures, they used runners. The Greek soldier Phidippides ran to Athens with a message about the victory of the Battle of Marathon in 490 BC, and that, of course, is where we get the marathon race from. Horseback was another means of passing the mail. The Pony Express is perhaps the most famous example of such a system. The Pony Express extended from Missouri to California and really was only in existence for about a year, from 1860 to 1861, at which point it was overtaken by telegraph. There were 184 stations, 10 miles apart. It would take typically 10 days for a letter to travel the distance. Homing pigeons. This was a clever way of sending a small message. It would generally be a one-way message to the bird's home. The message could be up to 2.5 ounces in weight. The longest range that a homing pigeon flew was about 1,100 miles. By ship? Well, back in the day, it could take a couple of months to cross the Atlantic, some 200 years ago. So if you think about that, you could write a letter home in the summer and not get a response until the winter. Messages were very slow back then. This, of course, all changed dramatically with radio. Marconi invented the radio in 1895. He initially demonstrated a 2-mile transmission. And then in 1903, Marconi sent the world's first message from North America to Europe. Nowadays, you can communicate with someone else with no wires, what we call wireless communication, and therefore you're not tied to a location to receive a message. So the word radio comes from Latin radius, which in English can mean ray or staff or spoke. It is applied to the term, I should say, was applied to the newly discovered electromagnetic radiation. There were amateur experimenters very early on after the invention of radio. The Radio Act of 1912, after the Titanic tragedy, began the federal licensing of amateur radio. The amateur radio operators were relegated to the quote-unquote short waves of 200 meters or shorter, which were thought to be relatively useless. The short waves were later discovered to have some rather interesting properties, however, namely that they can refract off the ionosphere and allow for communication halfway around the world. But at the time, that wasn't appreciated, and so the amateur radio operators were given what were thought to be useless, well, not useless, but relatively less useful bands. The American Radio Relay League is the national organization for amateur radio in the U.S. It was founded in 1914, and at the time, the relaying of radio messages was an important function. Remember that this was during World War I, and hence the name, American Radio Relay League. Just for fun, here's the symbol that's enclosed in the ARRL logo. It's an antenna with a coil connected to ground, and you can see that this is an important component of a radio system. Here is shown a simple crystal radio, kind of like this one up here with the coil and a variable capacitor for tuning. If you just connect a variable capacitor, a diode for detecting the signal, and headphones, you have yourself a radio. So that's, you know, the symbol that is enclosed in their logo has historic significance. So amateur radio is becoming more popular. There are approximately 800,000 amateur radio operators in the U.S. currently. That is about 1/4% of the population, so roughly 1 in 400 people. This turns out to be a good number. It's kind of the sweet spot, or the Goldilocks phenomenon, if you want to think of it that way. This allows enough people to be listening and out there making contacts that it's easy to make a contact, which is particularly important during emergency situations. However, it's not so many people that the bands become overloaded. There are approximately 3 million amateur radio operators worldwide. When there is a disaster, the infrastructure tends to be overloaded, so it's important that the bands that we do use not become overwhelmed. And this number of 1 in 400 ratio of operators in the general population turns out to be very functional. There are 3 levels of, or classes of amateur radio in the U.S. There's the technician level, then general level, and finally amateur extra. There is no Morse code requirement. It's still recommended, but they removed the Morse code requirement a number of years ago. Now, in addition to analog voice communication, there are many digital modes modern digital modes, not just Morse code. There are packet radio types of communications, and I'll show you a little bit about that in a second here. One can connect to repeaters via the internet even. So there are many different ways of communicating. This is an example of the Automatic Packet Reporting System, or APRS. This is a system where you set your radio to send a ping every several minutes, and you can control the time interval. It will send your call sign along with your GPS coordinates, and optionally you can include a short text message with that. And it will be repeated by what are called digipeaters. Those are ham radio operators who have digipeaters. They just volunteer to do this, which will rebroadcast your signal locally. And then when it reaches an iGate, which is operated by yet another amateur radio operator, that will then be put onto the internet. And that information then is available on the internet. You can look up aprs.fi and and go to the map of the world and zoom in on your particular area of interest and see who is pinging over the last hour, if that's the time period you select. Like this map, I believe, is an hour's worth of activity. You can see a number, quite a few ham radio operators in the Seattle area, including some who are clearly taking a ferry ride and so on. And so this is a great way to keep track of people, or things like the experiments that the kids will do in middle school and high school with the weather balloons and taking photographs at the edges of space. Well, you've got to recover your package when it comes back down to Earth, and a very common way of doing that is to put a amateur radio transponder on the package that pings with APRS, and it becomes very easy to track and to find. On the right are Ken, AB7X, and his wife Cora in our West Seattle Grand Parade, and he turns his APRS transponder on during the parade, and you can see him traveling down the parade route here, down California Avenue in West Seattle. So it's easy to follow their progress down the parade route. This is an APRS track during a 10-mile hike that I did near Lake Tahoe. Most of this route did not have cell phone coverage. Some of this route through here did, but most of this had no cell phone coverage. I was almost always able to reach an amateur radio repeater. The repeaters are up high in mountains and on top of tall buildings and whatnot, with the intent of allowing for long-range communications. Cell phone towers, in contradistinction, are designed specifically to have short range. The intent there is to allow the reuse of frequencies. So the cell phone towers work in cells that have a range of perhaps 10 miles, but they intentionally do not have a long range. So I'm sure you have noticed when you go on drives out into far-flung reaches, or when you're on hikes, that the cell phone is typically unavailable. The amateur radio often is available, as it was on this hike. Almost the entire hike, the amateur radio was available. One place where there was definitely a radio frequency blind spot was here at Gilmore Lake. Gilmore Lake is up rather high, and it's really in a local minimum, if you want to think of it that way. The transmitter for the repeater is over in this direction, but here you have a lake that's up high, and then you go down into the lake, and that radio signal doesn't get through. But for almost the entire hike, I could reach a repeater, and as you can see, for most of the hike, I was also able to get an APRS signal out. It was at this point the radio battery died, so there were no more pings here. But then that night on the tennis courts, I sent a APRS signal through the International Space Station, which was ironically picked up by one of the people in our club in West Seattle, even though I was on vacation down in California. So that closed the loop here. So this is an example of, again, APRS, the Automatic Packet Reporting System. There are many bands spread throughout the radio spectrum with amateur radio, and that is one of the primary advantages of getting your license. This diagram here shows the radio spectrum, not the entire radio spectrum, but the most useful parts of it. This is the medium frequency band where you'll find AM radio, the high frequency band, otherwise known as shortwave, very high frequency band where you'll find FM radio and television, some of the police bands, marine radio, aircraft. And then we have ultra high frequency here where you have more TV, other public safety frequencies and so on. So in red I show the amateur radio bands. And as you can see, they're everywhere. So CB radio is this skinny little yellow segment right here. FRS, that's the Family Radio Service, and then GMRS, the General Mobile Radio Service. Think of the walkie-talkies you can buy at Costco. Okay, that's another really skinny little band right there. So this gives you a pretty good sense of just how much bandwidth we really have. And again, it's spread throughout the radio spectrum. So you can take advantage of the various characteristics of the radio waves in different bands, such as NHF with shortwave radio, where you can talk to people halfway around the world. Now keep in mind, bandwidth is very valuable. It's limited. You've all heard about the buying and selling of spectrum. Cell phone companies are constantly looking for spectrum to purchase. They're has been the buying and selling of TV spectrum and so on, and it tends to go for billions or I don't know, even trillions of dollars. I mean, the spectrum is quite valuable. Amateur bandwidth is granted by the Federal Communications Commission because we provide a valuable service, and we continue to demonstrate that over the years, particularly whenever there's a disaster, but also, with community service, there's emergency communications. We promote international goodwill with our communications, around the world. We promote and develop the radio art. Many developments in radio and TV have been from ham radio operators. This is a photo of our tent at what's called Field Day. Field Day is an event during one weekend in the month of June where amateur radio operators will carry equipment into the field and set up temporary communications with the antennas, power supplies. People bring generators, solar panels, and then try to make as many contacts as they can. It's a lot of fun. It's a big social event. Here is Kurt, another member of our club, working with 3 of my girls here with a shortwave radio and then a computer here for logging the contacts. And then each of the girls made, a dozen approximately contacts with various operators around the United States in short order. It was quite easy to make contacts with their setup there. It was pretty neat. So there's a lot of contesting and just simply talking on the radio, social events, and then also promoting international goodwill in making communications around the world. You're making contacts with people elsewhere, and it's a lot of fun. This is what we call a QSL card. It's basically a postcard with, that's created by an amateur radio operator. This one is from somebody in Sao Paulo, Brazil, with whom I made a contact. This QSL card on the bottom right was for making that APRS contact via the International Space Station that I mentioned earlier. Community service. These are two of my daughters, and here's Ken at a parade. So we frequently provide communication help during the parades in West Seattle. We also provide help with races and various events. Disaster response. Now here's where amateur radio really comes into its own. It's extremely valuable in this situation. This photo here shows the aftermath of Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico a couple of years ago. And I'd like you to notice the utility poles. This is where your telephone lines run, through here. All the thick lines that are relatively low on the poles, well, those are for telephone, cable TV, and that sort of thing, the low voltage stuff. The high tension lines are on the top of the tower. Well, the phone service was largely gone. Cell phone service also was largely gone. Not entirely, but mostly gone. And what was left was easily overwhelmed. The system is simply not designed to handle an emergency of this nature. Now, you might think, well, what about satellite phone? Well, I can't think of anything better, frankly, than a satellite phone if your ship is sinking in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, for example, or if you're lost out in the middle of nowhere. Satellite phone's great, but there are two drawbacks. One is that they require a subscription, so there is a continual cost associated with satellite phone. The phone itself can be expensive, although the prices are getting better. The other thing is that the satellite phone system can be overwhelmed. They certainly don't advertise that, but after looking for a long time, I was able to track down some technical information. The Iridium satellite system is perhaps the most sophisticated system out there. There are others as well, but that's a particularly good one with low Earth orbiting satellites, with 66 satellites in the constellation. Each satellite has 48 spot beams. Each spot beam covers a region of the Earth that is approximately 250 miles in diameter. The bandwidth for the uplink and downlink to users is only 10 megahertz wide. That's tiny. And because you're using spot beams, it's a little bit like with the cell phone system. They have to not overlap with frequencies, so you're only using a fraction of the 10 megahertz for each spot beam, so that at the margins you're not having confusion with other spot beams. And so there are 20 channels available. Each of those with time division multiplexing can hold 4 conversations for a total of 80 simultaneous conversations per spot beam, covering a region 250 miles in diameter. Well, needless to say, in a regional disaster, that's not going to work. Now, that was based on technical specifications from 1998. I think the Iridium system has become more sophisticated. They probably can fit more conversations now, and using text messaging you can fit more, quite a bit more messaging than with voice. But nonetheless, the satellite phone system can and has been overwhelmed during regional disasters in the past. So I wouldn't assume that a satellite phone is going to be a panacea. It certainly has its uses, and it is great, but it does have its drawbacks. So amateur radio is extremely useful in emergency situations. On the left is a photo during a drill, an auxiliary communication system drill at one of our communications hubs in West Seattle. We have a lot of drills of this nature. In amateur radio, people tend to enjoy getting out and playing with their equipment. And it's important to get out and test things so that you know what doesn't work or what part you forgot to bring along or whatever, so that the next time it happens for real that you'll be able to have a radio that actually works. Now the thing is, all you need is a radio, a battery, and an antenna. You know, the system does not rely on the underlying infrastructure. It doesn't require, you know, the internet or the phone system or satellites or anything else. It is, you know, if you just have a radio, a power supply, and an antenna, you're good to go. And that's what makes it so robust. It's also distributed all through the community, so it's not all going to go away at once. So it's quite robust. As part of what we do, we have, you know, rechargeable batteries, we'll have solar panels, generators, you know, whatnot, so that we can keep the communications going. At a convention for ham radio that I went to a couple of years ago, they had communications vehicles in the parking lot for us to go see. This is one from Blaine, Washington, and I was fascinated by it. You can see that it's on what looks like an ambulance chassis here, except that it has lots and lots of antennas sticking out of it. We went for a tour inside, and I was surprised, well, I should say pleasantly surprised, to see that of the 3 stations inside this communications van, the first station was entirely devoted to amateur radio. So, you know, the 2-meter band, 1.25 meter band, and 70 centimeter band, you know, VHF, UHF communications right here. The next station over was for the routine, you know, 800 megahertz fire, police, ambulance, you know, public services. And then the third station was all about HF, you know, the high frequency band with short wave, and that also was ham radio. So 2 of the 3 stations in this municipal vehicle were devoted to ham radio. And that was kind of a running theme with these communications vehicles that we saw in the parking lot. Ham radio was always a major part of it, not just the, you know, the public emergency communications. You know, some of them also had marine band or air band communications equipment. Some had satellite phones as well, but always in every vehicle, amateur radio was prominent. And I thought that was fascinating. At that same conference, a speaker from FEMA indicated that they really rely on the amateur radio. They actually, that's part of their plan during a disaster, is that they will make use of amateur radio in an emergency. It's not just something nice to do. No, it's actually very important. You can also do experimentation. This is my daughter Adeline. She did an experiment where she looked at the transfer of power with radio waves, and so this is a very directional 440 band UHF antenna. It's got 16.6 dBi gain, which is a lot of gain. Right here is a spectrum analyzer and a battery to power this spectrum analyzer. On the other end in this field was a transmitting antenna, and she determined how much power you could transfer and then also then convert to DC here with some electronics, and demonstrated you could, for example, light an LED, or if you were close enough and had enough power, you could actually light an incandescent bulb just based on the radio power. It was a fascinating experiment. She and I learned a lot about radio reflections with this experiment. It was quite interesting. And then based on that and some other things she did, she published in some amateur radio journals here. This is one about the radio power transfer. In the first experiment she did in 6th grade, she was simply seeing how much energy she could collect from an AM radio broadcast transmitter. And the trick there was to get a tall vertical antenna so that you could match the polarization, and then using a crystal radio was able to get an LED to light up, and actually got a voltage as high as 102 volts doing it this way. Not with much current. The internal resistance was high, but it was amazing how much voltage she was able to get doing this. And then here with the experiments that I was just describing, where she was transferring the power herself. Here's an article about matching antenna polarization that was published in QST magazine. This one was in CQ and then was republished in Italian with his ERA magazine. So that's a lot of fun. You can get out there and experiment, build things, try things, and who knows, you know, you can get things published. Other people in our club have gotten things published. You can teach. Here's Adeline teaching the electronics portion of the lecture series, and you'll see her handiwork. You know, if you look at chapter 3, I do the presenting. She's away at school right now, but she largely set up that chapter. So if you like teaching, that is certainly an opportunity that you can have in amateur radio. So lots and lots of things you can do. There's no need to take the test again once you've passed it. You simply need to renew it every 10 years. And you know, with renewing it, there's no test. You just have to let the FCC know that you're still alive, you know, so that they'll maintain your license. And if you do it online, I believe there's no fee for doing that either. So it's very easy. The class is organized according to the book chapters, so you can follow along. Exam questions are included in the presentations, so in most of the chapters, about a third of the questions are interspersed within the lecture itself, with 2/3 of the questions at the very end. In the rules-based chapters, all of the questions are included with the lecture itself. And then there are lectures, or really not so much lectures, it's more fun, you know, hands-on type stuff with demonstrations, scenarios, and practical stuff that will be available online. But if you actually come to our class, you'll get to come and put your hands on it and watch the stuff in real time. It's a lot of fun. To pass the test, you must get 26 out of 35 questions correct. The questions are drawn from a publicly available question pool that consists of 423 questions. So you can look this up. You can go to the ARRL website, for example, and look up the question pool. It's intended to be publicly available with the answers. It is divided into 35 topic areas. Questions in the 35 areas are in the back of the ARRL license manual. One question is randomly selected from each topic to generate a 35 question exam. Now, please note that the 35 topic areas in the back of the book, which is what comes from the FCC, are organized differently than the way the questions and material are presented in the book chapters. Every single question is within the book chapters, but they're in different order. So just be aware of that. The questions are shown in the original order from the FCC in the back of the book, and then there is a page reference associated with each question so that you can go and read about it if you're not understanding the question. So the lectures in this series are organized to follow the ARRL license manual. And so as I mentioned, questions are shown in the lectures, and often 2/3 of the questions in most lectures follow the lecture. 100% of the question topics are covered in the lecture, however. We are here to help teach concepts. So you can study on your own, and some people do. You can just get the book or go to various websites and study and learn the stuff on your own. Some people just memorize the answers to the questions, and you can do that, but the philosophy in this class is that you'll be much better off if you understand the concepts. And that's where we can really add value. We can help teach the concepts, and we can answer questions. So that is the big advantage of looking at this video series, or better yet, come to one of our classes. The more concepts you can understand, the better. On the other hand, you can't learn everything. I'm still learning stuff all over the place. That's one of the things that I find so interesting about it. There's always more you can know. In the end, you just need to pass the test. So in this class, we'll try to teach you as much as we can, but if you're not following everything, don't worry about it. To get your license, you just need to pass the test. And if you keep at it, use it, the radio over the ears, talk with friends in the club or whatnot, you'll learn the concepts over the years. So in the class, if you come to the class version of this, we'll be handing out thumb drives, and we would like you to take one thumb drive per family. Load the files at home if you like. It's not a requirement, but if you would like the materials on the thumb drive, then load it on your computer at home. I check to make sure that there are no viruses, but nonetheless it's always good practice to run a virus check first. I don't want to cause problems with people's computers. And then please return the next day. If you don't return it, well, that's not a big deal. We'll just charge you $8 to cover the cost of the thumb drive, label and whatnot. But I prefer that you return them, so I don't have to make new ones. These thumb drives contain various files that may be of interest. All were obtained free, so there shouldn't be copyright issues. They contain media videos, electromagnetic wave demonstrations from an antenna, for example. There is a video that is roughly half an hour long entitled Similarities of Wave Behavior, which is from Bell Labs in 1959, and I cannot recommend that highly enough. If you want to understand wave behavior, the superposition principle, where you can have one wave pass forwards and another pass backwards, and they pass right through each other. If you want to understand impedance matching and reflections, standing wave ratios, all those things that tend to be complicated topics, this video shows it with a mechanical analog, which you can see here. Which really makes it a whole lot easier to understand. So I highly, highly recommend that anybody interested in this, look at that video. You can Google it and find it yourself, but it's also there on the thumb drive. There are videos about radio operation, single sideband, auroral propagation, and so on. There's also literature. There's something called Resilient Washington State Earthquake Analysis, which is a government publication describing what they think the aftermath of a major earthquake in our region would be, what the effects on our infrastructure would be. For example, they expect that electricity will be out for 1 to 3 months if we have the big subduction zone earthquake, magnitude 9, comparable to what they had in Japan. And that's only to get back to the 70% level of electrical power. To get back to 100%, they anticipate would take a year. So that makes for interesting reading. I recommend looking at that. Included on the thumb drives are the ARRL band charts and band plans. That's all very useful stuff. It's readily available on their website, but I've included it on the thumb drives for your convenience. A Seattle Emergency Communication Hubs flyer for those of you who live in West Seattle or Seattle in general. This is very useful information, so you know where the communication hubs are for disasters. There's net control information, and then there's also information about the class itself. Thumb drives also will contain a list of scenarios to consider, which we will go over with the demos and scenarios day. So concepts will be taught on the first weekend. Lectures are also on YouTube. See the links to each chapter on your thumb drive. So if you want to, see a lecture again or a part of a lecture again, that's available on YouTube. I recommend that you study during the following week. We will give you the exam at the very end of the week, but I recommend you study, the material during the week. And what is perhaps the best way to study is this internet hamstudy.org. It's really quite nicely organized. You can take practice exams. It will generate 35 random questions and give you the exam, and you can see how you're doing. Once you get to the point where you consistently pass the test with a good safety margin, remember you have to get 26 right. So if you're getting, 29, 30 right consistently, then you're ready for the test. It will also allow you to go through material in order, or you can have it give you questions, and then questions you get wrong, it will several questions later repeat, and then once you get right, it won't repeat, so that you quickly home in on the ones you're having trouble with. That is an option. There are many options with hamstudy.org, and people tend to find it very, very useful. There are other websites too, of course, and you can study from the ARRL license manual. There's nothing wrong with that, doing it, old school. In the back of the book, you'll see the questions in the 35 test subject areas. The answers are in the margin, so you can simply cover that with a ruler as you go down the questions. If you get a question wrong and don't understand what's up with that question, we'll give you a page number to refer to so you can read about it. So my biggest recommendation is hamstudy.org. My second biggest recommendation is hamstudy.org. And then my third recommendation, if nothing else, look at hamstudy.org. I really recommend you do that during the following week until you get good at taking the exam. There will be time when you return next week for questions and answers, and we'll help you with anything that you are confused with. Now for the test, you'll need to bring $15, either cash or check made out to the ARRL VEC. Bring a legal photo ID or alternatives, which are listed on the information on your thumb drive. You will need either your Social Security number or your, federal registration number, I think is what that stands for, which is a number from the FCC. So we recommend obtaining your FRN ahead of time. so you don't have to use your Social Security number. You can do this online. It's very easy. This is simply a different identifier that the FCC can make use of, and so you don't have to use your Social Security number. You'll want to bring 2 black pens and 2 number 2 pencils along to the test. It takes roughly a week for the license to show up in the FCC's online database, and once it shows up, you're good to go. You can start transmitting. You're not allowed to transmit before that. You have to have a valid license on the online database. Now, of course, once you get your license, the next thing is you'll want to get a radio, obviously. And there are all kinds of choices here. This does not have to be an expensive hobby by any means. You can get Chinese-built radios like this Baofeng radio on the left for about $40. I've seen them even cheaper than that, actually, sometimes on Amazon. And they're perfectly good. They're not as durable, and they don't have as many features as the more expensive radios, but they're actually pretty good. People in the club seem to like them. One thing that you should be aware of, however, is that these radios are designed not just for ham radio. They're really intended for all kinds of business uses, including amateur radio. And so the radio will happily let you transmit on all kinds of different bands, including those outside of amateur radio, and that is a very good way to get into trouble. The FCC really looks dimly on that. That is, probably the thing that they really are the most concerned about, is that people know where to transmit. You need to understand what privileges you have. So if you get one of these radios, the first thing I would do is program it. Put all the repeaters, any simplex channels you want to include, and program the thing so that you'll be able to use it with the proper frequencies. So just be aware of that. You can get into trouble with those radios if you don't know what you're doing. This is obviously a much more expensive handheld radio. This is a tri-band radio. It's got GPS built in and APRS built in. It's fairly durable, more durable than the Baofeng. It's water resistant. Very sophisticated radio. And then there's everything in between, as you might imagine. Then the next step up is to go mobile. So this is an example of a radio. This is an ICOM 7100. This is a radio that can go in your car, so it works off of a 12-volt power supply, and will transmit up to 100 watts on shortwave, or 50 watts on the 2-meter band, and so on. And it's a very nice type of radio, these mobile radios. This one happens to do shortwave as well as the VHF and UHF, so it's a very, very useful type radio, but then you pay the price for it. There are cheaper radios, and certainly if you buy used, you can get much cheaper radios, but you can also, get more expensive radios. Then there are base stations that, the sky's the limit. You can spend, $10,000 on a radio if you really want to. Many people just use the mobile radios at home. This can serve perfectly fine as a base station. You just need a 12-volt, power supply for it. So they make AC to DC converters that have sufficient current capacity to operate such a radio. Some people simply stick with the $40 radios, and that's all they ever do. So, there's a wide range of radios that you can purchase, wide range of antennas that you can have. You really don't have to spend much at all, or you can get very fancy. It's really up to you. Then the next thing, I would consider joining a club, and I would recommend, certainly if you live in the area, to join the West Seattle Amateur Radio Club. You don't actually have to become a member of the club to come join us For our social events, if you decide to join the club, it's only $12 a year. And we are a 503c nonprofit organization. All the money goes to such things as educational efforts, maintaining our repeater, things of that nature. Nobody's getting paid from this. We have something called Ham Jam on the first Mondays of the month in the evening at the time of our Monday night net. And so that's a great time to come and join us. There will always be a few of us there who can help you with whatever questions you have, and then you can sign into our Monday night net. We'll help you do that. You can do it, with one of our radios if you don't have one yet, or bring your own, and we'll help you figure out how to set it up and talk on the radio. And we also have a club breakfast, what we call ham and eggs, on third Sundays at Bee's Restaurant. Elmer's Club, and Elmer in ham radio lingo is a mentor. So we have something called the Elmer's Club, which is really aimed at newer people. Those are on the first Saturdays at the Great American Diner, and we'll help you with your radio, we'll help you with questions. We commonly have topics that various people present there. It's a great way to learn more, and it's just a lot of fun. It's fun to come and socialize. So, we love ham radio. We hope you will too. We invite you to join the club, partake in community service events, social gatherings, emergency preparedness. While you're at it, after you get your feet wet, maybe take it the next step. Consider helping with community events. Build a Go Kit. That's a portable radio kit that you can take out into the field, a self-contained system, with a radio antenna and battery. Consider joining an emergency communication service such as ACS. And so that is my introduction to ham radio, and please come join us, and we hope you enjoy it. Thank you.